Turn it on. We got it.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody.
No.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Global Dealmakers Perspectives from the Boardroom panel. I just want to start with a very brief introduction. There's a rule when you speak in front of people that if you're not that good, you steal from other people. So Winston Churchill, can't think of anyone better to steal from, made a beautiful quote. He said, "However beautiful the strategy, you should occasionally look at the results." I think that's the objective of this panel. You have a group of people here, not me, I'm just the consultant, who have delivered results from deals, from M&A, and this session is about exploring their perspectives on various aspects of that. Just by way of introduction, I'm a partner in PwC Tel Aviv, having moved here 4 years ago from London. I lead our post-merger integration practice, and I've done about 10 deals with Israeli companies over the last few years. Some of the flavor may come out in the discussion now. I'll let the panel introduce themselves in about 15 seconds. But just in terms of background to this panel discussion, PwC's recent survey has a very, very interesting insight in technology M&A. In 2011, there was $69 billion worth of deals in M&A, which compared to the 2009 market dip is 90% increase. The other interesting factor, and the guys on the panel will know this more than me, is 28% of CEOs globally are planning M&A in the next year. So M&A is big business, M&A is important business, and I'll let these guys introduce themselves. I'll let them talk a little bit about the deals they are doing, have done, and some take-home messages from one deal each for the audience. So Mitch.
Yeah, my name is Mitch Garber. I'm the CEO of Caesars Interactive Entertainment from Las Vegas. I'm a Canadian-Israeli. I've done 3 acquisitions in Israel in the last 5 years. One last year, which I'll talk about when the time comes.
My name is Dominguez with Cisco. And by the way, to all of you, hooray for hanging in there for the last session. So I'm proud of you. And I'm with Cisco for 20 years, and I work in the office of our chairman and CEO.
I'm Eyal Waldman. I'm the CEO of Mellanox Technologies.
Hi, my name is Mickey Rodea. I'm in corporate strategy of IBM. I used to manage R&D here in Israel.
Okay, let's start with question 1. All of you have been involved in cross-border deals. When do they work and when do they fail? Carlos, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll be happy. Cross-border deals. I've lost count. I think in total, in the last 20 years, I think we've done something like 176 of them. They're not all cross-border. A lot of them are within the United States. But, there's a couple of things that we look for and we've learned through all these acquisitions. The first one is there a cultural fit? If you're going to only buy technology and not, even take into consideration the culture of the companies that you're buying, that's not a good thing to do, because where most things fail is actually on the cultural side. The second thing that I think is very important is that you are aligned in vision. A lot of companies that are smaller that we acquire have this vision of being able to get to markets or be able to, build their company to a certain level. And sometimes we're buying technology for a very specific purpose, but that may not get them to there. So understanding and giving them, that kind of coaching is also very important. So the cultural pieces. And then the last one is, especially when you're out of the country, is having some understanding of the culture of the country that you are acquiring a company in, because that's so important. And also, don't let them stand alone. Once you do an acquisition, bring them in to the family. Right, and we were talking about this during break. It's kind of, maybe not intuitive that when you're acquiring a company, they become your family. And sometimes we tend to negotiate very heavily, right, to get the best deal. And what we've discovered is actually getting the best deal from a financial is not always the best deal in the long run. So sometimes paying more or setting expectations where there are bonuses for performance and stuff to keep those employees is far better than trying to negotiate a fantastic deal. And we learned that the hard way a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know, we've done one deal, and one deal we were on the verge of doing, and we cut it at the last minute. So I completely agree. I think what needs to work is first a very thorough due diligence, that there's no surprises. If there's significant surprises, the significance of everything you've done before just diminishes, and things will go wrong. So I think a very important is a very thorough due diligence, and trying to understand, by the way, from both sides. So the way that I approach is I tell the other side, look, we're in this together. We're going to succeed or fail together. And I completely agree about the price. One of my smart board members said, if you pay plus minus 20%, it doesn't matter. If it fails, it fails, and it doesn't matter how much you paid. And if it succeeds, it succeeds. So I think the price, that's number one. Number two, I think it's important, the team, the people that you acquire. You need to understand that they have the right mindset in terms of the vision that you have. And I think third, integration. I think there's a significant better chance of succeeding if you integrate the two bodies into one company, as I've seen some people say, okay, we'll acquire, leave it as a subsidiary. There, I think the probability of failure is larger, in my eyes.
Mitch?
No, I think the two first gentlemen have hit on all the key points. Culture, team, fit. The price of the acquisition is generally, obviously it's very important, but when you're buying something, if you're paying $100 million, then you're expecting at some point for it to add value of 3 or 4 or $500 million. So if you pay an extra 10%, it really shouldn't matter. I think the one thing that I've done about 15 acquisitions, is how you socialize the team that you're buying, that they will be able to continue to run their business the way they ran it, that attracted you to it in the first place, and that you're not going to change fundamentally the way they run their business. It's their biggest paranoia and priority, and it should be, in my view, the acquirer's priority to try to reinforce that the reason you're buying the business, if it's not just a piece of technology, is because you actually like the way it's being run, and you think that what you have can add to the way they run the business, but not necessarily change the way they run the business.
Michael?
So maybe, I see the IBM acquiring companies in Israel, and this was done like 10 times already, and I was involved in all 10 in various roles. And my view is that now that IBM is very active here in R&D, there is no cultural difference that matters. We are sufficiently close, we understand where the gaps are, we know how to manage it. Integration is kind of a very smooth process in IBM. I think it goes to individuals. There are some people that are in their nature easier to integrate into a large company, and some have difficulties. And I think we have to be aware of that in a sense when we start a company. Take into account that at one point there will be integration, and not everyone is integrated easily. That's my experience.
If I can add to that, no one talked about egos, but I think one of the important things when you deal with those merger and acquisitions is people, and everybody have egos. And if you're the acquiring company, you need to make sure that you put your ego aside, both in making the decision to go forward, because there's a lot of decisions at different points. But even if there's a point where you say, okay, we got to cut it off, put the ego aside and make the right business decision. And then if you continue, make sure that you put your ego aside and make sure that the other side's ego has enough room, not just yours, in order to have them feel successful. So in order to make the M&A successful, you need to have the other side feel very successful. And that has to do with a lot of communications, a lot of ego culturing, and this is something I've learned from Ben advising us. So it's a very important ego in these M&As.
Just to build on that question, it's very interesting that the responses have all focused on soft issues. They're not soft, but culture, family, ego, people. These are not necessarily all the things that managers are trained to spot and to work on. Interestingly, 60% of deals that go to due diligence fail to materialize. So I suppose my question to you as a panel, as Winston said, of experts, is it's very easy, it's clear that the soft issues are the key. But in your advice to companies looking at potential acquirees, what specifically would you recommend they do, they look at, they focus on in the period while they're looking at the acquisition?
Yeah, I think if you had a panel of CFOs, the answers would have been very different. The CFOs are, traditionally with legal and accounting, looking at the numbers, doing due diligence on the technology or software or whatever it is that you might be buying. So I take it for granted that by the time it gets to the transaction, that the due diligence has been passed, that the numbers are as the numbers appear, that the people are as they appear, the contracts are as they should be, the software and the IP belongs to the company that I'm buying, and then maybe as CEOs or chairman, we move on to those, you call them soft issues, but they are the issues that make the deal a success or a failure. But certainly, in the beginning weeks and months, all of the hard work is done, generally not by the CEO, and that's the most important work to get to a deal.
One of the things that we look at, Ben, that I think is important is we buy companies not only for the products and market presence that they have today, but we also pay a lot of attention to what's in the development side. A lot of times the acquisition has not to do with the current product, but what is imminent. So, having a clear-cut, idea of not only what's present, but what's coming shortly and what the vision of the team. And also the thing we evaluate too is this organization going to be able to scale? Is it a one-trick pony that just does one thing, or are they going to be able to develop for an extended period of time? And what's that environment that we need to do? So those are some of the other issues we consider.
I think we look at two things. Number one, there's a lot of temptation to go and buy companies that are not very successful, and you think, okay, we can fix them and make them better. That's, we have so much to do with our own stuff that it's a mistake to think that you can go and fix someone else. So it's much better to go and acquire a team that is successful by itself, because if it's successful by itself, they'll continue being successful. If not, then not. And I'll say, I think, what you said in other words. Again, one of my other smart board members said, you need to look at green bananas, not yellow bananas. Yellow bananas will become brown soon, and overpay for green bananas because this is the future. So what we need always to continue looking is for green bananas and not the yellow ones.
Maybe a comment about two companies that we did not buy. So I think one was dishonesty in the numbers. So no need, I guess, to expand on that. The other one was technology mismatch that was observed very late in the process. So there was huge investment made in due diligence and everything, and a week before decision, there was technology judgment applied one more time, and there was a mismatch. So about this second one, I think it could have been avoided very long time before the due diligence started. And the reason that this happened are two. One goes back to the root of the company, where it made technology decisions that made it ineligible, in my mind, for acquisition by IBM. And this was probably 5 years earlier than this. So my recommendation is, whatever you do and whatever technologies you decide to base your product on, take into account that if there is an expected gap between that technology and your potential acquirers, you'll pay for it at the end.
So do it the IBM way from day zero.
Or do it in a neutral way, but don't do it.
I agree, I completely agree.
Right, so it has to be, integration has to be planned from very early. That's one point. And the other one is maybe the role I'm playing in Israel, which is, I know many companies. And in this particular one, this is a company I decided not to get involved because I thought the technology gap is too large. But no one asked me in IBM. IBM is so big. They didn't ask me what I think, and they found out about it a week before the contract was about to be signed. So my advice on that one is, be known. Play very open, talk to the companies, make sure that, they understand the gap so that you don't get into the investments of running a heavy due diligence and then find out that there's technology mismatch. You could know this ahead of time.
Eyal mentioned bananas and green bananas. So I suppose my next question is about green bananas. In the businesses you work with and the industries you're in, there are many new changing phenomena coming quickly. All day today we've spoken about the cloud, social networking, the impact of 4G, you name it. It's a very, very rapidly changing market. In terms of the trends of your market, what impact does that have on mergers and acquisitions and your view on where the M&A market is going in the next year or two? Mitch?
You know, in our business, it is dominating the mergers and acquisitions discussions. Doing interactive acquisitions, buying digital interactive companies. We just bought a company in Israel called Playtika, one of the world's leading app developers for iPhone and Facebook and Android. And that's part of a larger strategy for Caesars to make sure that we're able to address our next generation of customer, to make sure we can cater to the next generation of customer in the manner that they want to be catered to, take advantage of new trends, get our brand out there, the Caesars brand, the World Series of Poker brand. And so for us, you know, getting into places where we're not necessarily expert, where we haven't been present over the last 40 or 50 years because they didn't exist, is of particular importance. And so I would say it's driving a lot of the decisions that we're making, especially in an era today where CapEx is a huge, huge prohibitor to deals. We don't want to build $1 billion hotel. We want to be in a more interactive business that requires lower CapEx. I think a lot of the companies will find that they're looking for those lower CapEx businesses with higher margins that will be able to cater to the customers of the future.
You know, there's a couple of philosophies when we're trying to, you know, get into a new trend or trying to acquire some technology. We go through a very defined rigor, and the process is as follows. The first question we ask, do we have the capability? You've heard cloud and you've heard all these things, and you know, the bottom line with mobility and cloud and all the things we're working on, it's really connectivity on one end, you know, faster pipes, bigger pipes, you know, more bandwidth. And the second piece is all around intelligence. Because to have big pipes that are dumb doesn't really make a lot of sense. So we've been playing around with a concept that, for lack of a better word, I'll call P squared, which is when you marry, you know, presence and triangulate presence from more than one location. So, for example, it's not only GPS, you know, where am I located, but also maybe what am I doing? Am I in a supermarket, or am I shopping somewhere else, or am I at a, you know, in a sporting event, right? So understanding, you know, my presence, and then marrying the presence to preference, because my preferences will be very, very different dependent on where I am physically located and also depending on what I am doing. So, you know, from a trending perspective, it's all around intelligence and also speed.
I completely agree. That's exactly what we do. We do big pipes and smart ones.
You and I are aligned.
And yeah, so I completely, you know, we're in clouds, in Web 2, in social networking. I mean, we build the infrastructure, or help build the infrastructure, and the interconnect is becoming the differentiating point for many entities and a competitive advantage, because the servers are kind of becoming a commodity. The flash storage and then the storage behind that has some innovation, but then the networking and how you connect all those things. And think about that, every 48 cell phones that are being sold out there, you need another server in the back room. And this big data problem is what makes everything want to run faster, better, and more. So imagine all of this unstructured database. In order to analyze, you need to move data from place to place, you need to process. So we're very much into that. I think this is one of the most interesting technologies in the current decade, and we're very much in that. We are, I think, can go organically to a very large number, but we're also looking at other acquisition opportunities.
Maybe a little bit more general answer. So I think, at least in IBM, you know, a lot is coming from the top. You know, the general managers in the business deciding what their strategy is, driving, you know, growth plan as they are expected to do, identify gaps, then look in the market and go for a company that can fill that gap. That's kind of the natural process going top-down. In Israel, there is an additional dimension that we can add, and that's what I'm trying to do, that we can add, in this case to IBM, could be done with other companies, which is look at the companies in Israel, and there are many of them, and try to abstract what they see. And once you understand what they see, you can construct almost a strategy which complements what IBM is doing and adds value to it. And iterate between these two. You know, what you see in the startup market, or community and what IBM needs. And then you form an opinion, what is an emerging trend based on what you see among the startups. Then, once you have that, you can try to convince the general managers that this is a valuable asset. And then, if they agree to that, you can go and say, okay, so here is a company that actually feels that extended strategy. And my experience is that this yields these green bananas that you were talking about. And I'll give an example. I'll not name the company, but at one point, I looked at the area, eventually went through this process, convinced the general manager, the company was acquired for some amount, let's call it X. As I did that, I looked into 5 other companies. All of these 5 other companies were acquired 2 or 3 years later for an amount which is 8 times larger than what IBM acquired. And the reason was, it was just much earlier. Now, there was no miracle. I mean, all the signs were that this is going to be a hot area. Except you want to find a way, as an acquirer, you want to find a way to observe these signs very early. And the common wisdom of the startup community in Israel gives you a lot of that insight and can help you a lot. So this is kind of like abstracting from the community as opposed to abstract from a single company.
I think we're in danger of coining a new phrase, green bananas, which is all anyone's going to remember from anything today.
I'm actually upset, Ben. Being half Cuban, I didn't come up with a banana analogy, so I'm really upset over that.
We've still got 12 minutes and 34 seconds. Just to stay on that topic, tomorrow is all about startup companies, and many of them will be thinking about moving into M&A, or M&A as a step to achieve their goals. And they will be debating the issue, I think, all of you mentioned before, which is, do we make or buy? Do we try to build the technology ourselves, or do we try and acquire it? If you were to give your views on the relative pros and cons, or the key questions they need to weigh up as they decide which way to go, what would you be saying to them?
I think if you're a seller, then you need to be asking yourself why you're selling and what you expect to get out of the sale and whether you're going to be around after the sale to grow the business with the acquirer. And I think, as Carlos pointed out, if you're a buyer, I think build or buy is generally a very easy decision. You either know you could or should do it, or you know you should buy it. It's very rare that you're sitting in a meeting thinking about building or buying, and both options are equally attractive. Generally speaking, you want to own it in the end. And so my view is I like to take the path of least resistance. If I can buy what I need at a decent price, and if that thing that I buy, when integrated into my company, is worth more than I paid for it, then I have to buy it. And if I can't buy it because it's fitting a square peg into a round hole, then we have to build it.
I'm going to give you 2 answers, Ben. One of them is a big company perspective, and then a real recommendation for the entrepreneurs. So, one of the things that was quite interesting is if you asked me 10 years ago what our M&A strategy was, it was quite different than today. 10 years ago, when there was a market opportunity, we would go out and buy 2 or 3 early-stage companies. We place our bets multiple places, and knowing that if one of them hit, we're okay. We did that in the Ethernet market. We did that in fast Ethernet and a variety of other areas. The last 5 years have been a tremendous shift. We are now not as interested in early stage. We'll only do 1 acquisition, and we typically do later stage, and they have to be successful, and they have to be running a good P&L, right? Because we're saying if fundamentally the business isn't sound, we're not going to jump in it. And that's kind of our model today, and we're living by that. Now, from an entrepreneurship perspective, if you're thinking to grow the business through M&A, I'm assuming that you're also taking in consideration that it's not only a technology play, it could be a sales and marketing play, it could be a distribution play, it could be a strategy play, it could be access to a particular person that has contacts in a particular market that you might want to be in. So make sure that you have a clear understanding what is it that you're acquiring. And once you evaluate that part, ask yourself, are there other components also that they bring to the table, because that may be the differentiation between one company that you might want to buy or another one.
Eyal?
So just that the green banana is not a term I turned down. It's Ervin Federman, one of my board members, so I don't want to take the recognition. Anyways, in terms of what to do, when you build a company, I think you should build a company to become an independent, successful company. And by the way, I wasn't joking about about the IBM way, because I think you should start out from day zero building a very clean and very organized, solid company, because that's the only way to be successful, regardless if an IPO and an M&A is at the end. And I think thinking at the end point in mind is very important from every step you do. And I've seen many successful companies. As an entrepreneur, I don't think you should think of buying technologies. You should just think of doing technologies. As large companies, IBM can afford itself to buy companies that are not generating money, that are not accretive. We, as a smaller company, need to continue and generate a larger bottom line, and every M&A will impact, or most M&As will impact our bottom line. So we're always looking for opportunities of companies that are break-even, already are profitable, in order to be interested in.
So I think your model is very similar to IBM, actually, more than you think. IBM wants to buy companies when it's accretive. And the last one that I've seen, there was an effort, organic effort going on, and there was acquisition alternative going in parallel. And that's the first time I've seen it. And actually, the team that was working organic was larger than the team that eventually was acquired. And what made a difference was time to market. The company that was acquired in this case was not profitable, but the feeling was that the combined team, first the culture match is good, and the combined team can go to market much faster. And using the sales force of IBM, it can reach the market, very quickly worldwide, and this was the basis for the calculation. So I never recommend companies like that. From my perspective, I always want to see something which is actually adjacent spaces, where there is 100% of growth. It's not something which it's a little correction of course. It's totally new, and for that you have to have more conviction. You have to have real value. You have to have proven customer. I mean, you have to have many elements that make it an attractive company. So there are things that come from the top, as I said. Those sometimes are let's close a little gap here and there. There are other things that come from the top, meaning let's get into a totally new area, and then you don't have a choice but to acquire. When I look at it, I'm kind of in the middle between the two. I want to see something which will create significant value, that IBM is maybe not engaged or only partially engaged. And the numbers show, if you look at R&D in Israel by IBM, we started in 72 with 3 people. Right? This was Joe Raviv started that. I joined 4 years later, and now it's 1,200 people working in R&D here. And there was not even a single year in which we went down, despite some bad years of IBM. So you really have to worry about the value, including everything you do organically and things that you acquire. It always have to add up significantly. Otherwise, in a competitive environment, you just can't win.
Okay, last question before we sum up. I want you all to take yourselves back to the time when you weren't seasoned M&A professionals. And really thinking, someone once told me that a CEO of a startup company, when he does his first deal, surrounded by advisors, people like me, lawyers, investment bankers, accountants, insurance people, you name it. And on day one of the transaction completing, certainly being signed, they take their pay and then they go home. And they leave you with the small job of successfully integrating the business you buy. The added complexity is now geographically and product-wise, integrations are in broader and broader spheres of geography and product. What would be your top tips to a CEO in that space as he deals with actually going about integrating or bolting on or merging the company that he or she buys? Mitch?
I think you have to be clear and delicate about the plan. I think the plan has to be well laid out. I think it goes back to your first question. It's about the relationship you have with the company you're acquiring. If that relationship is a strong, trustworthy relationship, I think the integration will be smooth. But for a CEO, for me, I mean, I've been CEO for almost 14 years, it's the people who surround me that make the integration work or not work. At the end of the day, I don't fool myself into thinking that I'm going to do the integration. It's the CFO, the COO, the accounting, legal, compliance. It's all the people that surround you, HR, who deal with the cross-cultural and cross-geographic and product issues. And if you have a strong team, and the strong team understands the importance of communicating well with the new strong team that you've just acquired, you'll have a success. Otherwise, you're going to have problems that come up to the top that you're going to have to deal with. So for me, it's the strength of my team and their understanding of how important they are as they go and shake up the culture on the other side. Because no matter what you say, you've just changed a corporate lifestyle by buying that company. And if you can deal with it delicately and elegantly and straightforwardly, then I think you have a success on your hands.
You know, the easy part is the acquisition. The integration is the one that gave me all the gray hairs. I didn't have I'm grateful I have hair. But, you know, the hardest thing is after the acquisition is really have a detailed assessment as to what's going to happen to the people. Because all in all, when you're buying a company, it's people that you're really acquiring and that you want. Your assets walk out the door every single day. And if you're being acquired, you want to know, is there a job for me? Is there a future for me? You know, what does this mean, both good and bad, and having that clarity. And I think if you do that work up front, it's very, very valuable. And, you know, also noticing the redundant functions where it's CFOs and you know, customer service and things that you know are redundant, where are they going to fit? And understanding and having those conversations. And the last one, which to me is the most critical, is you have to communicate. And it's not fly in, spend 2 days, disappear, and never come back. I mean, this is very emotional, and it's like the car goes off the track every day. You get in there, you put the car on the track, someone hits the you know, those electric cars, it goes off, you got to come back, put it back on the track again. And if you don't do that on a consistent, very measured way, that's where you get into trouble.
So I completely agree. Communication is the most important thing. You go into a very emotional roller coaster. There's
you
distress.
You and I agree a lot, don't I?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm going to buy you a drink when we're done. Agreement.
I like you.
I like you too.
That's for a different panel.
There's a match here. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. But I think communication is very important. I think you need to be very straightforward. You need to be very honest. And you need to communicate a lot. I found myself communicating for like at least 4 weeks. And what's interesting, it's not only the acquired company you need to communicate, it's also the company that is acquiring. Because my team was afraid what is going to happen with them. So it's not just the people you acquire are worried about their jobs, but the people that are in the company that acquired the company. So you need to communicate to both sides. And I found my teams sometimes, you know, going bizarre because what am I going to do? It's like the new team, me. So communicating and being very, very straightforward, very, very direct and very to the point. No bullshit, looking everybody in the eyes. I agree it's about the team that has to do the work, but I think as a CEO, if you're not there or if you're there, it's much better looking everybody in the eye and having a lot of meeting with different teams, different conversations, telling them this is what's going to happen. And if you're consistent and you make it happen, it doesn't mean you cannot change, but if you're consistent and very straightforward, you have a chance to make it work. So a lot of communicating for the 3-4 weeks is a very tedious job.
I agree with everything that was said. One comment is, this notion of non-invented here is very strong when you acquire a company. And it doesn't go away the next day the acquisition was done. It can go for years. We are a team and they're a team, and why did they join us? We could do this ourselves, and so on and so forth. So breaking these barriers is heavy stuff. And it has to go on for a very long time before it's over, and sometimes it takes years.
We're out of time, so I want to thank the panel very much for your contributions.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.